Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping straight into one of the absolute most fascinating business mysteries out there today. So, think about the global automotive industry for a second. It's a grueling, fiercely competitive, incredibly capital-intensive world, right? And the traditional paths to winning is pretty straightforward. You build as many cars as possible, as cheaply as possible, and you try to sell them to literally everyone. But there's one iconic brand that just completely ignores that rulebook. They build a tiny, tiny fraction of what the massive giants build, and yet they absolutely dominate the industry when it comes to profits. I'm talking, of course, about Porsche. So how on earth do they pull this off? Let's find out. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. 1. The profitability paradox. 2. A legacy of consistency. 3. The controversial SUV pivot. 4. The mechanics of margins. And finally, 5. Selling emotion, not specs. Section 1. The profitability paradox, volume versus value. To really grasp what Porsche is pulling off here, you first need to understand the traditional automotive playbook, which is all about massive scale. You've got giants like Toyota, Volkswagen, and Ford, and they're playing a pure volume strategy, cranking out tens of millions of cars every single year. But Porsche? They're operating on a completely different planet. They play a scarcity strategy, producing just a tiny drop in the bucket compared to those millions. Now, by all traditional business logic, they really should be struggling to survive against the raw economies of scale of those big mass-market players. But here is the paradox. Despite that incredibly low production volume, year after year, Porsche consistently generates some of the highest profit margins in the entire automotive world. In fact, they often earn way more profit per vehicle than companies selling ultra-exclusive hypercars, cars that literally cost 3 or 4 times as much as a standard 911. So how does a company producing relatively few vehicles completely blow past manufacturers building millions? Well, the answer isn't just incredible engineering. It is a brilliant, highly calculated business strategy. Moving to Section 2, a legacy of consistency, refining the DNA. Look, this kind of profitability definitely doesn't happen overnight. To understand their margins today, we actually have to look back at how they built their unique DNA decades ago. The story starts back in 1931, but actually, scratch that, they weren't even a sports car manufacturer at first. They started as an engineering consulting firm in Stuttgart, solving technical problems for other companies. It wasn't until 1948 that they debuted the Porsche 356, which was a car focused entirely on the driving experience, rather than just dumping excessive horsepower into the engine bay. Then 1964 hits and everything changes with the introduction of the legendary 911, which ultimately set the stage for their incredibly daring pivot in 2002 with the Cayenne. The core philosophy behind that 1964 911 completely broke all the conventional rules. First off, they put the engine behind the rear axle. On paper, that is literally the worst possible place for weight distribution, but they somehow engineered it to handle like an absolute dream. It also had this unmistakable silhouette. But the real secret sauce? Refinement instead of reinvention. Over the decades, while all their competitors were totally redesigning their sports cars every few years just to chase new trends, Porsche just kept refining the 911. The design naturally evolved, sure, but that core beating heart of its identity, it never changed. And it really comes down to this simple truth. Customers didn't simply buy transportation. They bought into a legacy. This insane consistency gave Porsche a massive competitive advantage. Think about it for a second. A Porsche you buy today still carries the distinct, recognizable DNA of that original 911. Very few brands in the world, automotive or otherwise, can claim that kind of unbroken continuity. But as we know, heritage alone doesn't pay the bills, which brings us to their next massive strategic move. Section 3, the controversial SUV pivot, a calculated risk. So by the late 1990s, Porsche had this perfectly focused, beautiful lineup of sports cars, but they were in trouble. They desperately needed to grow if they were going to survive independently. So they took the biggest, most heavily calculated risk in their entire history. A sports car company decided to make a family SUV. And when they announced the Cayenne, oh man, purists literally lost their minds. Critics and enthusiasts genuinely believed that making a heavy, practical family hauler was going to destroy Porsche's premium, high-performance image forever. But instead of destroying the brand, it completely saved the company. It was a masterstroke. First, the Cayenne attracted a totally new customer base. Families, executives, people who wanted that luxury and driving dynamic but couldn't sacrifice practicality. Second, because of that, their overall sales volume absolutely exploded. And third, and this is the genius part, the massive profits generated by selling all those SUVs actually funded the future development of the very sports cars that the purists were so worried about. They essentially created a cash cow to protect their crown jewels, and they repeated this exact same success years later with the smaller Macan SUV. That brings us to section 4, the mechanics of margins, how they make the money. Okay, so we know they have the legacy, and we know they successfully expanded their market with SUVs. Let's lift the hood and see exactly where this sky-high profitability comes from on a granular level. Customization is a massive profit engine for them. Buyers rarely, if ever, purchase a standard base-level Porsche. They want to personalize it. From crazy special exterior paint colors to premium leather, carbon fiber interior trims, all the way to sport exhaust systems, Porsche offers just a staggering, almost overwhelming menu of bespoke options. And those little checkboxes, they add up incredibly fast. Just ticking a few options on an order sheet can easily add tens of thousands of dollars to the final price of the car. For Porsche, this is unbelievably lucrative. The customer works away with a car that feels totally unique and personal to them, and the company earns huge, pure profit margins without having to actually design or build an entirely different vehicle. It is the ultimate win-win. This all feeds into a brilliant 4-step pricing cycle. Step 1, scarcity. They purposefully build slightly fewer cars than the market actually demands. Waiting lists are literally part of the ownership experience. That scarcity naturally creates step 2, exclusivity. You just don't see a Porsche on every single corner. That exclusivity then gives them step 3, incredible pricing power. Unlike mass market brands, you are rarely, if ever, going to see a significant discount on a new Porsche. And that uncompromised pricing power directly protects step 4, their immense profitability. Now here's another vital mechanic of those margins, the customer loyalty path. People typically don't just buy one Porsche, they enter an entire ecosystem. A young professional might start out with a Boxster. A few years later, as their wealth grows, they upgrade to a 911. When they start a family, they don't leave the brand, they just add a Macan or a Cayenne Turbo to the garage. Because this relationship often lasts for decades, Porsche's customer acquisition costs are drastically lower than basically all of their competitors. We also cannot ignore their massive hidden engineering advantage. Yes, Porsche is highly exclusive, but they are also a part of the broader Volkswagen group. This means they can intelligently share underlying platforms and technologies across brands. So they get all the benefits of industrial scale efficiency, completely avoiding the astronomical cost of developing every single component from scratch, while still delivering that bespoke, high-end exclusivity to the end customer. Honestly, it's a structural advantage that is very, very hard for anyone else to beat. Finally, wrapping up the margin mechanics are these 2 massive brand strengtheners. First, motorsport credibility. Their incredible history of victories at Le Mans and in brutal endurance racing aren't just for show. They prove their performance engineering under extreme conditions. Second, strong resale value. Buyers are so much more comfortable dropping 6 figures on a vehicle because they know for a fact the car will hold its value remarkably well. Some limited editions even go up in value. Finally, section 5, selling emotion, not specs. The ultimate differentiator. Bringing this all together, the true philosophical core of their entire business strategy is this. They sell emotion, not specs. You can see this beautifully in how they handle the transition to electric vehicles with the Taycan. Most EV makers are out there aggressively chasing specs, right? Arguing over 1/10 of a second in 0 to 60 times, or who has a slightly larger battery pack. But Porsche took a completely different approach. They prioritized driving dynamics, build quality, and emotional engagement. They made absolutely sure that even without a rumbling gas engine, sitting behind the wheel still felt unmistakably like driving a Porsche. The crucial point here is understanding what they explicitly do not do. Porsche does not sell just raw horsepower. You can easily find faster electric cars. They don't sell extravagant luxury alone. There are other brands with way more opulent, lounge-like interiors. And they certainly don't sell maximum practicality. There are much, much bigger SUVs out there. Porsche knows who they are, and they aren't trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, they focus relentlessly on this single, profound truth. Porsche sells emotion. Every single design choice, every perfectly crafted interior stitch, every specific note of the engine, the exact weight of the steering input, it all exists solely to make the driver feel something. It's an emotional connection that competitors simply can't copy and paste onto a spreadsheet or a spec sheet. And that leads us to this summarizing thought. While others are out there chasing market share and measuring their success by the sheer number of cars pushed off the lot, Porsche measures success by the value, both emotional and financial, that each individual car creates. In business, bigger definitely isn't always better. Sometimes the most profitable company is the one that knows exactly what not to become. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to think about. How can you apply this desirability over volume philosophy in your own industry? Whether you are selling software, consulting services, or consumer goods, what would actually happen if you stopped chasing every single possible customer and instead focused entirely on scarcity, exclusivity, and creating massive emotional value? Take a page from the Porsche playbook. It's a real game changer. Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.